Honourable Murray McCully.
Mr. Speaker, that there have been some shortcomings in this case is something that is not denied by members of this side of the House. But the member who has just resumed his seat does himself no credit by dealing in such an intemperate fashion with what is such an important matter. First, it might be useful to the House, Mr. Speaker, if I was to outline the facts as they are known to me.
Apologies.
Mr. Speaker, the incident that is at the heart of this matter occurred on the 9th of May, the evening of the 9th of May of this year. A diplomat or a serving military officer from the Malaysian embassy was arrested by police, and there was some confusion about the matter because steps were taken by the police that probably should not have been taken without the waiver of immunity. And there was a discussion, I know, involving the Ministry of Foreign Affairs officials the next morning to establish whether immunity applied in this case or not. I was informed on the 9th of May, the 10th of May, the Saturday, that an arrest had been made involving a Malaysian diplomat, and advised that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as is its customary practice, had sought waiver of immunity as it is conferred under the Vienna Convention. And I was fully satisfied that those were appropriate steps. The nature of the advice that came to me was to enable me to deal with any media inquiries that might occur, not to solicit any approval or action on my part. And can I say to members opposite that they are either being willful or foolish in making assertions that ministers in any government should get themselves involved in the prosecutorial process or in the consideration of an application and a request for waiver of diplomatic immunity. That is something that Mr. Shearer and others have tried to put abroad in the last day or two, and let me be very clear about this. The day that we see ministers become engaged in decisions in process about prosecutions, the day we see ministers get involved in determining which diplomats might have be the subject of a request for immunity or not, is a very sad day in a country that prides itself on promoting the rule of law. Indeed, can I point out to members opposite that just a few weeks ago they were dining out on some allegations against one of my colleagues, asserting that he had been involved in a conversation with police about a prosecution matter. And here we have those same members of Parliament asserting that my crime is that I did not interfere in a prosecutorial process. What is very clear here is that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs did exactly the right thing by lodging a third-person note asking formally for the Government of Malaysia to waive the immunity that was available to this individual under the Vienna Convention. Now, Mr. Shearer criticises me for making those documents available. Well, let me respond to that. The third-person note is a rather anodyne document, one that simply outlines in diplomatic language the formal request for their government to waive the immunity that was available. And the response that was received by our government is, again, an anodyne document declining it. There is no question of embarrassment or of any sort in releasing those documents. There was clearly last night an appetite amongst some commentators and members of the news media to check that we had in fact had the exchange that the government had informed the media we had had, and I had no objection to those documents being released. And I'm sure that the Malaysian government has no objection to those documents being released. Now, just let me fast forward a little bit to what happened subsequently, because last Friday, for the first time, I was made aware that this diplomat had gone home to Malaysia and that the immunity that had been sought by the New Zealand government had not been granted. Mr Shearer and others have suggested that I should have known earlier and that I should have done something about it. And as to the first part, I agree with Mr Shearer. I agree with him very strongly that on a matter of this sort, I should have been informed by the Ministry, and there are a number of formal ways in which that should have occurred, because this is a matter of significance. A New Zealand complainant who has been the victim of an alleged serious assault clearly was going to be denied the right to see this person brought to trial in New Zealand if the waiver of immunity was not granted. That is a matter of significance, and it should have been brought to my attention. It is also blindingly obvious that if this person was brought to trial in the way of a court-martial in Malaysia, or indeed anyone who followed up on these events domestically through the police or elsewhere, that it was likely to become a matter of media interest anyway. So the idea that somehow the government might be part of some cover-up is frankly ridiculous. What has clearly happened here is that there's been a shortcoming in the Ministry in failing to inform its minister and failing to inform other ministers that this formal request has formally been declined by the Malaysian government. So I agree with Mr Shearer and others. We clearly should have been told, and we were not. And can I say to those who think that this is an incident that occurs only once in a decade or something of that sort, sadly, we do from time to time receive these matters. Well, I've actually been asking exactly that question. I've got quite a lengthy list, and it is also the case that sometimes these requests are declined. And in every case, I would expect the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to draw these matters to the attention of their minister. As to what should happen after that, that is a question of judgment, but what I say is that ministers cannot take steps if they do not know, and in this case I did not know and I should have known. So, Mr Speaker, last night I was confronted with a situation where the Malaysian Foreign Minister was making public comments with every good intention in Malaysia that did not match with the statements that I'd made in the New Zealand media. I'd been quite clear, and I'd advised the Prime Minister, so he was quite clear of the New Zealand policy that we would, in all of these cases, seek a waiver of the immunity that is available under the Vienna Convention. And that is the position that we've adopted in the media over the last few days. But when it became clear to me that Minister Anifar, who I know and have worked with for some time, was under the impression that the outcome in this case was one that was acceptable to the New Zealand government, I thought that I should make some further inquiry, because it concerned me very greatly indeed that the Malaysian government might be under the impression that the formal steps that we'd taken were not the only options that were acceptable to us as an outcome in this case, because I had not given any mandate beyond that, and none had been sought from me, and so I started to search the files, which were eventually, I must say, made available to me, and immediately upon drawing the conclusion that our stewardship of this issue had some shortcomings attached to it, I made a statement to be clear about that with the New Zealand public and the New Zealand media. I want to try and portray as accurately as I can what I did see in those files, because there were a number of exchanges, in particular a meeting on the 12th of May between New Zealand officials and Malaysian officials, and there was also some email traffic. And first I must say, and I do want to emphasise this, the third person note that the New Zealand government forwarded to the Malaysian government very clearly stated our desire to see this person be able to stay in New Zealand to stand trial for his alleged crime. That formal request is there. But it was also clear to me that there were a number of informal interactions, both oral and email, which had the nature of blurring that information. What was clear to me was that officials had engaged in informal communications over some of the complexities in this case, and I won't comment on those complexities, in a manner that would have enabled the Malaysian government to draw more inferences from the discussion than I felt comfortable with. In short, I'm saying that the officials who advised Minister Anifar that the Malaysian decision would have been one that was satisfactory to the New Zealand government had been given a basis for making those statements. I'm very confident that Minister Anifar, in making his decision, did so with the very best of motives, believing that it was possible that New Zealand would accept the outcome of them declining the request. It is very clear that the Chief of Defence Force in Malaysia had a very strong desire to see this person trialled by way of a court-martial, and if any members present doubt the severity of that, then I think they need to learn a little bit more about Malaysian military law. But I also was comforted to see Minister Anifar state very clearly that he was open to an extradition application if New Zealand was not satisfied with the process. And I say again to Mr Shearer and others, that is not something that ministers initiate. We do not initiate extradition proceedings. Police, independent prosecutorial authorities who have conducted the work and are able to make an assessment make those applications. And the New Zealand Police will, I am sure, give consideration to whether such a step is warranted in this case. Now, I just finally want to say this. Minister Anifar made it very clear to me that he regarded the alleged actions of this official as tarnishing the reputation of every Malaysian diplomat that serves in New Zealand or anywhere else around the world. And he will leave no stone unturned, his government will leave no stone unturned to hold this person to account. And I want to place on record my very considerable confidence that Minister Anifar, as a man of his word, stands firmly behind those commitments. But, well, I'm also saying that in this case there are clearly grounds, if the police want to initiate the extradition proceedings that Mr Shearer and others are urging should be initiated, and Mr Anifar has indicated his preparedness to grant such extradition. So, Mr Speaker, this is not a situation where I can say I'm satisfied with the steps that should have been taken. The victim here is due an apology, and her family is due an apology, because what should have been a straightforward application that was supported by straightforward informal communication by the ministry for which I hold responsibility did not carry out its business in that straightforward fashion, leading to a response that is out of line with the wishes of the New Zealand government and I'm sure the New Zealand people. It's also been the case that some of the assurances the Prime Minister has given in public have been given without the full knowledge of the informal communications on the file. I have taken responsibility for that. I've indicated to the Prime Minister that I am deeply apologetic for that reason, and I've done my best to set the matter straight, to set the record straight on the first available opportunity. This is not a series of events, Mr Speaker, which we can look back on with great pride, but the important thing is to secure justice for this victim and her family. There are some avenues available for us to ensure that occurs. They all involve us engaging properly with the Malaysian government. That is a duty that I take very seriously and one that I will pursue over the days ahead.
Jan Logie.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And I rise with some trepidation